Yes, we are back. Romford Horror Film Festival Podcast. We are back with another interview. Remember, everybody, February the 22nd through to the 2nd of March, we are going to be down at Romford Film Festival, Horror Film Festival. The newly branded Lumiere, no longer the premiere, that has been closed, and we are moving on. We're bringing up the Lumiere, and it's going to be awesome when we get there. On Friday the 28th, over on screen 8 at 11 a.m., as part of the Super Shorts, we are showing a fantastic stop motion movie called VHX from two directors that, we're pretty familiar with, because last year we showed Spiral to the Center, a short movie we loved. So it's great to see you guys back. It's always good to see directors returning. How are we today, Scott and Alisa? How are we today?
Great. Wonderful. Yeah, very, very happy to be back.
Yeah, thank you so much for.
It's always fun to have returning creators, because all we really want to see through the festival is, like, people just leveling up and getting better and bringing their passions to the screen, and most of all, letting us have their passion and their baby to put up on the screen. So I just first want to thank you, because you must have had a decent experience last time. So thank you for bringing us another project of yours.
Yeah, no, we had a great time.
Really wonderful.
Yeah, it was great.
We have raved about our wonderful experience at Horrific. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody gets their own cocktail, especially first time round.
No.
I told other festivals, like, if you really want to, like, impress filmmakers, I've found, like, this one festival I went to, they made cocktails of some of the films, and our film got chosen. I'm like, if you want me to, like, really rave about you, that's what you got to do. So really, that was really special.
That's how you get the 5 stars on TripAdvisor.
Right.
Love it. So, firstly, what I like to do with these things is, I know we have spoken before and we sat down and had a chat at the last festival, but I always like to treat these interviews as somebody's first time finding you guys, finding us, finding your projects. So with that in mind, do me a favor, and could both of you just give us a little background on how you got into this mad industry and why on earth you would do that to yourself?
Go on, you first.
Okay. I mean, animation in particular, because I'm an animator mostly by trade. I always liked it. It's like classic story, grew up watching cartoons, really liked them. And then at some point realized, like, people gotta get paid to make these, right? Like, people get paid, like, which is nice. And luckily, no one in my family said that's dumb. They did support me, which is cool, which is not even advice I would give to people today. I don't think I would support the next generation of people who want to go to college for animation, but I did it, so I was allowed to. But it's a fickle career for sure, but I followed my dreams, and I've been a professional animator, which is, it has its ups and downs. Like, I don't get to work on the most interesting projects, honestly, throughout my career. Mostly I have designed a lot of lower thirds, like the ones on screen right now. That has been, I'd say, the number one thing I have I've gotten paid to do, is do things like designing lower thirds, which is cool, but it's not the most creatively satisfying thing. So my real outlet has been filmmaking, which I've been lucky to find the time to do that, because it is really hard to balance having a full-time job and animating. But I've been doing films. Scott and I have collaborated. I mean, we've been collaborating for 12 years. I wouldn't call everything we've made a film. We did web series and online stuff, but we kind of got more serious and wanted to collaborate on projects that we would pursue at film festivals and try to be a little more serious. So this is our 4th collaboration on a project that we have pursued the film festival route.
And for me, I'm a musician primarily. I had always kind of been very involved in music. Music's kind of followed me throughout my life. But I originally wanted to be an actor. And I started making silly films with my friends to shove on YouTube back in those early days. And basically when YouTube started cracking down on copyright, and I could no longer drop in, bits of music from Star Wars into my silly films. I started writing them myself, and then I didn't actually think about it properly as a career until I got to sort of university level, and I was studying at Newcastle College, and I was studying music there. And we shared a building with like the film and broadcast students, and I sort of fell into writing music for their projects, and that was kind of when I thought, actually this could be a job I could do. Obviously, you never get taught what job exists in music. It's like, you go study music, and it's like job options are like pop star, and that's kind of it. So yeah, I sort of went down an alternate route and started writing music for films, and I went to university for that, which is when I met Alisa. Through some lucky fluke of the internet, our paths crossed, and we started working together. And like she said, 12 years have gone by in the blink of an eye. And we've made a whole bunch of projects together, including this one, which we are very, very pleased to bring back to Horrific.
Yes.
And one of the things that I was fascinated about the last time we spoke about you guys is like you get co-directors like out there and everything like that, but you guys live so far apart. So like, explain exactly how far as co-directors you live apart and how that even works.
A number of miles. I mean, like,
yeah, a good couple of thousand. I live in Newcastle upon Tyne, England, up in the northeast of England.
I live in New York City.
I mean, how does that? I know when you're doing like the stop motion side of things, it maybe is a little bit easier, I guess, because remotely doing things. But Spiral to the Center was a live action shot. So how does this collaboration truly work? Because it does work, which is the imperative thing I need to say here. Like, everything I've seen from you guys so far just works. So how do you make that work with such a distance in between you?
I mean, I think the main thing is that our skills complement each other. Like, we can make films without needing to involve anyone else. Technically, we always do manage to find a few other people. Although that one film, the Post-it Hunting, was like just us. Like, no one else worked on that. But for VHX, there are other people. Spiral, there certainly were. But our skill set is so complementary because I'm an animator and Scott's music, sound. So I do all, animation is doing all the visual, and Scott can do all the sound, and then we smash them together, and that's a whole film. So that has just worked out. Like, yeah, but we can bounce ideas off of it, and we write the script together, but then I go off to animate it, and which is a very lonely experience, and then Scott kind of twiddles his thumbs, but you which is not totally fair. I don't know.
I mean, that's kind of the secret of how it works with the animated stuff, is that, we are co-directing throughout pre-production.
Yeah.
We are writing together, and, we're looking over storyboards together, and we're sort of figuring out what the film's going to be together. And then when we get to make it, Alisa goes off and animates on her own. Obviously, that's not a skill I have. Even if we did live in the same country, that I couldn't help with that. I could make tea. That's it. I'd be the tea boy during production. But yeah, Alisa can then go off and do all the animation work, which kind of largely has kind of already been directed before we started, and then that's kind of as animation works. And obviously, Alisa being the animator, she can sort of make changes and decisions on the fly that I'm always okay with, because she knows what she's doing. And then, once that's all done, it's then my turn to sort of handle all of the sound design and the music kind of on my own, because those aren't skills that Alisa has. But we sort of have this sort of system of like checks and balances, where at any moment where either of us is doing the jobs on our own, we're always checking in with the other and saying, what do you think of this? Is this working for you? Blah, 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 blah.
I think what you said about like animation in general, that like you're kind of pre-directing it, is so true. It's so smart, because I mean, that's what, when you make an animatic, that is the film. Basically, like it's just a rough version, and then basically the final animation is just recreating it but making it look polished. So you try to make every decision. And with VHX was really interesting, because the animatic I made, I've shown it to people and they get confused because they're like, oh wait, it's the final film. I'm like, no, this is the animatic. Because what I did for the animatic is I set up, the set is actually the floor of my bedroom. It's shot on the floor of my bedroom. It's just this bookcase, and I bought a rug and put up fake wood paneling, which was really just boards with wallpaper, like stick-on wallpaper on it to create. I was trying to make it look like a classic American like basement. This is like a classic American thing, is having like wood paneling and like an ugly green rug, and you store all the stuff you don't want anymore down there, but you can't throw it away, because that's the problem with Americans in our basements. It just holds stuff we don't want, but we can't throw away. So that's the floor of my bedroom. And I put that whole set together, and then I had the script. We had the script, but we didn't have the animatic yet. So I put that, and then I took photos of the set, like the different shelves in the floor, just like still photos that would be roughly the angles. And then I took, I didn't even take photos. I just like Googled images of VHS tapes, and I got a bunch of VHS tapes, and I stuck, like in Photoshop, I put faces on them and made them roughly the designs of the characters. Say like this. Little face. And then in After Effects, which is animation software, I just took the photos, I slid them around, and I just planned the whole film with like photos of VHS tapes I took off Google. And then so it looked, the animatic, usually animatics were like drawings, but this one was cutouts of the tapes going like this. I kind of pre-animated the whole thing. And then after we recorded the voices, I was able to use my animatic to plan out the lip sync, and I figured out the mouths, and then I could use that when I was doing stop motion to figure out exactly what mouth for each frame. So the animatic looks like a really, really rough version of the film, and it almost looks done, but it's, because it has, like the set is there and there's like faces, but you might be tricked into thinking you're looking at like a really like rudimentary version of the film. And so we could see the film, like we could see it basically all there. I just had to recreate it in stop motion, and it was pretty faithful. Like I pretty much did it frame for frame exactly the same. But speaking of like Scott having the input later, remember when I had it, I was like replacing shot by shot. So every like week or so, Scott would see like the rough cut, would see the animatic with whatever shots were in there that I had done that week. And at some point you were like, oh, we're missing a shot here. There were like 2 places that we inserted shots later.
It's one of those things where, we sort of discuss the animatic together. Alisa goes off and creates the animatic, and then it sort of comes back to me, and we back and forth it. And, I could say, oh, maybe we could Dutch this angle a bit more, or we could push for some interesting color grading here and stuff like that. And then, like Alisa says, by the time that's all done, the film is kind of effectively made. We just have to remake it for real. Yeah. And then, like Alisa says, that, watching it through and going, something's not quite working. Can I suggest another shot? And, just putting something in that has a bit more of a transitionary effect or whatever the case might be. And that's kind of how we work together. It's a system that has evolved out of necessity, but it does work. And I think VHX is probably the best example of it working. Obviously Spiral to the Center was a very different film. Alisa actually came to the UK and was here when we filmed that, so we were able to actually be directors together. But this just back and forthing and sharing ideas and placing trust in one another, I think that's the important thing. I know Alisa had to take a bit of a leap of faith and place quite a bit of trust in me for the 1950s B movie sequence. because I think I my communication skills failed me, and I wasn't adequately explaining what I had in mind for this thing, and it was like, you know what, I just need to go and film it, and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about.
We had a few like heated conversations where I'm just like, you are not explaining this. And I was like, at some point I was like, don't explain it, just shoot it, I don't care. Like
And it was one of those things, you know what, if we film it and she hates it, I've made my own 30-second short film, it's fine.
Yeah.
So there is a little sneaky live action in VHX, but some people don't fully realize like what, that we made that.
Yeah, it seems to be a bit of a running gag with our films at the moment. When Spiral was on the circuit, there was always at least one element that people thought was real. They were like, oh, so the music's real. No, we made the music. Oh, but like, is Rick a real person? No, Rick's just a complete fabrication. Like,
it's Scott's YouTube channel.
Yeah. I mean, but Scott actually has a YouTube channel where he does. No, it's all fake. It's all fake. And VHX has kind of had a similar bent where people are seeing the 1950s. I don't know how I'm not. I mean, I guess it makes sense, in VHX because it's an animated film, so you're not going to recognize me from the rest of the film. But
tell our viewers and listeners and viewers out there exactly what VHX is and where the idea came from and why this was your next project to make.
It wasn't going to be the next project. No, because we've had this other project which has been we've been working on for years at this point, which it is finally getting made. It is, we cracked it, but this other stop motion film that like has nearly like killed me several times, and
it's been hanging around our neck since before Spiral to the Center.
Yeah, like an albatross, like that, a true albatross around our necks. So, like all like this, it's fine. It's
fine.
There's some deep-rooted trauma with this film.
That was like a real therapy moment there, by the way. It's like, there's this thing, but it's fine. It's totally fine.
But that, we were, especially me, I was really trying to like dig in on it, and it just wasn't happening. And then, I get easily distracted. So it was actually last Christmas. So, like a year and a couple of months ago, I was at my parents' house and had some time to kill. And I do this every time at my parents' house, is I always end up going through like a box of something weird. So it was VHS tapes. My mom said something about like, oh, you should go through that box of VHS tapes. And I did. And I was kind of just looking at them and holding one. And I just kind of had this weird image in my head that it'd be fun if like, if one was personified, like what would a VHS tape act like? I don't know. It was like a fleeting idea. I didn't even know where to put the face on it. At first I thought the face would be on the spine, that it would be like on the shelf and you'd see like it here talking. But I had that fleeting idea, and then it kind of like gnawed into my brain. And then I had that little voice in the back of your head, and it was like, don't worry about the other films, animate VHS tapes instead. That'll be great. That's what you need to do. And then it kind of sat there for a couple of days, and then I sketched out this idea, and I didn't want to like tell Scott because this other project we kept putting aside, and I didn't want to put it aside again. But then I told you, and I pitched you this very half-baked idea, but you had a great idea for it.
Yeah, I mean, Alisa had this, the idea of making a film about personified VHS tapes and having them all be played by real VHS. That's 100% Alisa. And she'd sort of told me about this idea, but I think the original idea was a bit more like existential. It was a lot more, the tapes pondering their own existence and, who am I, and, all
well,
that.
They could get taped over, but it'd be like, what if like a family vacation got taped over by an action movie, and now it's like a macho,
what would happen?
Like it's like a big macho personality, and it's having a fight with the tape it was next to when it had a different personality. I had this like, it was too complicated.
Yeah, and it was one of those things. The moment she told me that, I was like, no. It's much simpler than that. It's a zombie movie. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of clicked into place. That idea of, a tape being taped over and therefore their personality changing. I was like, no, zombies. They get taped over and they are zombies. Yep. That's it.
Yeah.
And it was one of those ideas that like was, it was like so simple that it was kind of stupid that it hadn't been thought of first.
Yeah.
like we got to zombies the long way round.
Yeah, we did. I was going far more like, a little too obtuse. So the brilliant zombie story, and I had, I wrote up like a draft of the script within a day or two, and then you had some notes. But it's one of those where within a few days of that script never changed again. Like, not really. We had it pretty much nailed down, or maybe. Like a couple days later, we had another conversation about the film, and we didn't have the ending figured out. And on that second talk, like the ending just came about through like natural conversation. So we didn't know how it would end. And it was like, oh, right, well, we'll just set it up, and, we'll just have the tape think that, she's being watched, and we still wanted to give her this want, which is that she's forgotten and she wants to get watched, but she doesn't understand that she's just getting taped over. So we went with kind of a bleak ending, but it's fine. It's fine.
But even that, like, I think is a really good example of, how well we work together, like as writers, because Alisa has like a really fantastic sense of story. She has a really fantastic sense of, how she wants a story to be told. And one of my better strengths is dialogue, making dialogue sound more natural or just a bit punchier or something like that. And it's amazing how much a story can evolve just from that process. Alisa writing a story and then me punching up the dialogue, and then that sort of going, oh, well, hang on, if that he would say that, then maybe the story should go this way, and it's sort of back and forth that way too.
Yeah, and the dialogue took longer, honestly. We were still making changes, because I can remember us talking about like lines of dialogue when I was on my trip to California, which was in April. And we came up with this story in January. It was right after Christmas, but we were still like up in the air. We were still like, there were still lines that we like argued over about which way we should record them. So because we didn't record it's funny, you were talking about being at Horrific last year with Spiral. We were actively working on this film when we were at Romford. Actually, but February had been like really rough because I had gotten the flu and I was like sick for 2 weeks, and then we had the trip for Romford. So like the VHX, I was like annoyed because I had gotten behind. We both got behind on working on it because it isn't that complicated a film, and I didn't start animating until the beginning of May, but I should have started animating way sooner. I wanted to animate in like the month of April, but it's fine. It's fine. We did it, but we were working on this. It's funny to think back. I'm pretty sure the animatic existed when we were at Romford. We were just tightening up the dialogue, really. That was kind of the stage we were at, and I'm pretty sure the tapes probably nearly existed. I think honestly should look at our interview last year. We might have hinted at this film. We may
possibly. I do have a slight recollection. Yeah.
I'm really curious what we said, but I definitely think I was hinting at it a little bit to people who said, "Were you working on next?" And I think we kept it close to our chest just because of my experience with the other film, where I didn't want to just in case something happened, I didn't want to make it too well known that it was being worked on. But this one, VHX, was one of the smoother projects. Really, it went great. Besides having a speed bump of having some trips and an illness in the middle that delayed it by a month, which is no big deal. Besides that, it was a really smooth project. Really, really good.
And actually, there's another sort of horrific tie-in with VHX, in that when we were writing the script, obviously we were having to try and come up with casting ideas, who we wanted to voice these different characters. And fairly early on, I had thought about my good friend Henry Thompson, who's a fantastic filmmaker in his own right, as the voice of Marshall in the film. And of course, he was in attendance at Horrific last year. And so I was able to introduce him to Alisa, and, they were able to chat. And I remember, I think, walking back to the hotel room one night, sort of saying to Alisa, okay, so that's Hank. What do you think of his voice?
Yeah. I was like, perfect.
He was, I think he was the first or second person we cast for the voice cast, and it was he was right there. I was able to point out his voice in person and say, what do you think of this guy?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, at Romford Film Festival, we make things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
And cheekily on the dialogue, being a little Brit, I have to say, Scott, you get my absolute favourite line of dialogue in pretty much any film we're going to be showing. I think you know which one it will be.
I do.
The reaction.
The delivery of that line is phenomenal. It's so good, and every time I watch it, I just sit and go, "Oh man, that's awesome."
And did I write that line too?
No, I think it was a fairly late addition.
But I wrote. Now I'm going to check the script. I wrote something.
There was some. It was in the script that he shouts something as he's dragged away.
I think I just wrote "cheerio," and you were like, "Can I make a change?" And I was like, "Of course." And you're like,
"Yeah."
I
actually think I made that decision whilst recording my dialogue. Like in the script, it was just "cheerio."
Yeah.
So, he was going, "Cheerio!" Like as he sort of gets dragged off. And I was sort of doing it, and I was like, this, it's just missing something. And I was like messaging her, I was like, I'm going to try something. Feel free to veto, but, and I did like 8 takes of that line. And the first one was just it. I was like,
you've got to get it right.
Yeah. But no, I'm very happy with that. Very, very happy with that.
Yeah, it's a good line. It gets the biggest reaction. It's always fun seeing the film with an audience, which I've seen. How many times have I seen it with an audience now? 3? Maybe 3.
Well, that leads on to a question that I do have, and that is basically, I always tend to ask people what they're most proud of when they see things up on the screen. I normally start it with any creator can tell me what's wrong with the movie. I want to know what's right with the movie, what you absolutely loved with the movie. But I've kind of been retconning it a little bit. And what kind of reactions have you guys been getting when you watch this with an audience? And what kind of reactions are you getting that maybe are a little bit surprising?
I mean, it's one of those things where, we end up having like a bit of a checklist, which is like, okay, this is going to get a gasp, this is going to get a laugh, this is going to get, a sigh or whatever the case might be. I think my favorite one is that there's a moment in the film where it turns. Yeah. There's the transition into a zombie movie, and there's like a little flagging that happens before that, where it involves the audience reading a bit of text on screen that's sideways, and you can sort of see heads kind of do this a little, and then you sort of hear people go, ha 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 ha,
yeah,
as they kind of figure out what's going on. Up until then, it's nearly always silent.
Yeah, but also, well, except for Cheerio Wankers. But until then, if you're at a horror festival, you might be thinking, why is this film here?
Yeah. I think it was a little bit nail biting the very first time I saw it with a crowd, because like up until that great funny line, just dead silence.
Yeah.
Just dead silence.
Well,
then there's that line, there's a laugh, and then about 30 seconds later, there's that wonderful titter of realization.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the film, everyone's having a ball, which is wonderful.
There's usually a little polite chuckle when Marshall, but he's the first VHS tape we see, so he like comes off the shelf and he coughs and there's dust, and people like chuckle because they're just like, what? But yeah, no, absolutely.
Well, I think it's also the title sequence that we designed doesn't immediately give it away that it's animated either. Mm-hmm. So the title sequence of the film is made up of genuine VHS footage of Alisa's childhood.
Yeah.
And so you could be forgiven for thinking it's a live action film, and then the first character introduces himself and is an anthropomorphized cassette tape, and the audience kind of is like, oh okay.
And that was one of the things I really loved in it, and it leads into the titling of the videotapes as well, because you have this very nostalgic thing. Like I said at the start, I worked in a video shop. I was a massive VHS fan, and then I loved the fact that you didn't use like classic movies, if you know what I mean, for the titles like written on there, like Night of the Living Dead or whatever. It was such and such as Prom Night or Family Reunion, things like that. What was the what was the logic in naming these videos? Because it does play into that nostalgia, the memories of this person's house kind of plays into all that. Was that a conscious decision is what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I don't think there was ever a version of this movie where they weren't home movies like that.
Yeah.
We very much wanted them to be home movies right from the beginning. And of course, that was where Alisa got the idea, looking through home movies.
I always wanted to be home movies. And we talked about this, but I mean, I mostly name them just because they're very like, the activities are very American. I mean, I don't, Laura's Junior Prom, like, I don't think we have that. So, I have a giant list somewhere of like ideas and of what I wanted the labels to be. And I wrote these all myself because I bought the tapes off eBay. These are like, ironically, these do have mostly movies on them. They're just like taped off HBO in the 90s. I looked at most of these. It's like, I mean, there's a lot. There's some Star Wars. There's like lots of just 90s and 80s action movies. There is some Star Trek. I found some old SNL episodes. Like, it's stuff like that is actually on these tapes out of someone's basement. But when I bought them, I realized like, oh my God, I can't, like, having the tapes isn't good enough. I need labels. So I had to buy vintage labels, which were almost as expensive as the tapes. Vintage blank labels. So then I had to, and the glue was really terrible, of course. So I had to like glue them on myself because the 25-year-old glue, 30-year-old glue was not doing it. But I wrote all the labels myself. And I did kind of come up with a family because it had to be, if you look at them all, there is some logic. So like Laura is our main character. So I know that Laura, she would have been born around like 1980 for the timeline to work out. So she's like born in 1980. So I have to like think of her milestones and what year they coincide with. And she has a younger brother whose name I can't remember, but you see him on there. She has a younger brother. So sometimes it'll be like, school trip for the younger brother, and then I have her parents, and then she has a grandma, and then she has a best friend who is canonically Jewish because she has a bat mitzvah. So like, so I have a whole thing, and there's a lot of her with her best friend doing like, like birthday parties, and there's a whole family lore. And then there's Marshall, who I think, did we decide Marshall's her uncle? I mean, her last name is, Marshall's his last name.
Marshall is the surname, right? Yeah, Marshall is the surname.
Marshall.
So it's the Marshall family barbecue.
The voice is her uncle. Like that.
Yeah.
The man, the voice that Hank does is like meant to be her, like her uncle, or even her like great uncle or something. That is who that character represents, kind of like a fatherly figure, but not her father, it's her uncle. So we have there's a whole family tree that informed what the labels would say. It's kind of, I also, they live in like the Midwest because their like vacations are like kind of surrounding Midwest stuff. They're I think they live in like Ohio, but they did go to London once. So that was like the big trip to London, the one and only international trip. Everything else is very American.
And I'm sure they visited Romford when they were in London.
Absolutely.
Positive. Yeah.
And with that, are there any, I know you've mentioned a couple of little bits and pieces here and there that were kind of like extras that you guys snuck in, but are there any like hidden Easter eggs that anybody should be looking out for and maybe get a little kick from?
Ooh.
Feels
so long since we did this now. Obviously there's
on the shelves. That's not the VHS tapes. There's other stuff on those shelves.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's all sorts of
significance of all that.
There's all sorts of weird references.
The short film award. I did see that on the top of the shelf. I love that.
That is, I have that right here. This is one of our other films won this little trophy, but it's from 2022. So I photoshopped it to say 2002. But that's the trophy because the end of the movie, like the movie is canonically it's set in 2003. That's what we decided. It's set in 2003.
Yeah, that's one thing a lot of people don't realize. VHX is actually a period film.
Yes.
I mean, the tapes didn't give that away at all.
Well, because they're older. Yeah, exactly. But
all of the tapes characters are older than the film is set.
Yeah. We have this. a lot of lore. But like the trophies in there. There's another trophy that I won't grab, but I bought it off eBay. I bought a bunch of props off eBay because I wanted to put stuff on the shelf. So there's a softball trophy. Actually, I'm gonna get it because it's really funny. I'll get it.
Okay. Well, while we're waiting for her to fetch that, we also did have a lot of fun coming up with titles for the monster movie marathon that's happening at the end.
Yes.
So, there it is.
All right, I'll explain this quickly. I bought this off eBay. You can barely see it, but I just thought this would be like for the time period. And also, I played softball in the 90s, so this was like, this could be me, but I never got a softball trophy. So this is also me finally getting a softball trophy. It says 1994 State Park Softball Minor Division, 2nd place. So that's because Laura obviously played softball like all girls in the 90s. So I paid probably $10 for this. It's from Indiana. Blythe Sports of Valparaiso, Indiana. I don't know. And I got a mug that it says Colorado on it because that's another tape. It says they went to Colorado. So I even bought a mug that says Colorado so it would tie in. And there's also some pogs that are on the shelf because, which I still have. They're all over my apartment now because my niece got into them. And because I brought pogs for the film and now my niece loves to play with them. So they're all over my apartment.
Best game ever. Best game ever.
Yeah, it was. So there's some pogs on the shelf. There's a lot of books, and I tried to pick books that were all pre-2003. There's some good, like this, and a lot of them were mine from like, when I was a kid. So it's a lot of fantasy and sci-fi, which Scott approved of. We tried to make it feel like this Laura character that she's kind of like, I don't know, she's basically me though. Like, I mean, she makes fantasy books. Like,
this really has turned into therapy. I particularly loved the VHS copies of the Power Rangers. I love them being in there because massive Power Rangers fan.
Bought that off eBay. I did want to put some real movies in there, so right by the TV you see a stack of movies. And there's some on the shelf too. And we wanted ones that I mean, ideally they would have been horror movies, but you know how expensive horror movies on VHS are? Yep. So expensive. So my budget was Power Rangers.
But what's actually sort of kind of funny and frustrating about this at the same time is that I tend to go for long walks on an evening. It's one of the ways that Alisa and I are able to collaborate. I go for like a 3-hour walk at night, and I'm normally on the phone to her, and we're bouncing ideas around. And round about the time we were working on VHX, I just kept tripping over VHS tapes in the street.
Nice.
There was a place around the corner from me, and on bin night, every single night, every single week, I would walk past, and there would be the bin being propped open with a VHS tape. And I remember walking past, and it was something like, I think the first one I picked up was like a double feature of Oliver and Annie. And I was like, oh, my grandma would love to watch that. So we'll watch that. So I took that home. The following week, I went for a walk, and like Sister Act was wedged in there. And I'm like, right, I'm having that. And this went on for like 6 weeks. And then eventually I'm walking along the street, different streets, different area altogether. I'm on the phone to Alisa, and I'm like, oh, hang on, there's a shape in the road. I could see this like shape in the road. And I was like, I have to investigate this shape. So I get up close to it. Oh, yeah, of course. By this point, it's like probably midnight or shortly after. And I get up to this shape in the middle of the road, and it's a suitcase, like an old leather suitcase. And so I sort of kick it with my foot, and it's heavy, and I'm like, I have to know what's in here. Please don't be a body. Please don't be a body. Please don't be a body. Open it up, and there were 60 VHS tapes in there.
Wow.
Of like such a weird selection of movies too. And I was like, I'm having them.
Yeah.
So I lugged that massive heavy suitcase with 60 VHS tapes in it back to my house, and cleaned them all up. And it's like we range from like The Day After Tomorrow to The Passion of the Christ
Oh, nice.
to like there's like someone's wedding video in there, and there's like stuff taped off TV in the 90s. So like the deep irony of all of this is literally over the course of working on VHX, I just randomly stumbled across somewhere around 70 VHS tapes for free, and in order to make the film, Alisa had to spend a small fortune buying them on eBay.
I did randomly find a small pile of, I think, 3 tapes on the sidewalk in Brooklyn, but it was like the week after I finished animating, and I was like, why? And they were great too. It was a couple of really, there was like a weird B movie, like a weird, which one is it? I have it right here. This. Also, there's Power Rangers for,
there you go.
For this. I found here is Radar Men from the Moon. I found this on the sidewalk, but you know,
it's a Commando Cody, right?
Yeah, introducing a new character, so he's new. I still haven't watched
that is the reason why in the Star Wars prequels there is a clone trooper called Cody. He's Commander Cody, named after that. Yeah, there you go. There's some trivia for you.
I know. I know. There's the lore is very deep. But Scott, talk about the fake movies too. That was mostly you. You came up with those.
Well, sure, yeah. So once I had that dumb idea for that to make the 50s B movie segment for the end. The idea of there being like a monster-thon on, and this is why the tapes are getting taped over, and then it was suddenly, we need like a bunch of like fake crap B movie titles. And we wrote, but it was quite collaborative though. Like I remember writing some, and they were like too serious, and Alisa was like, "No, I want like Night of the Lobster," and like, really stupid stuff. So we had a fun. I'm struggling to remember what they are, but it's like a fun list of weird movies.
My Chiropractor Vampire. I think that's one.
My Chiropractor's a Vampire. I think that might be. Was that one of mine?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Collaborative. We wanted a my blank so blank.
Yes. Yeah. The actual 50s B movie that we shot is called Serpentosaur, but that's not in the movie. The title is not in the movie, but it's always been called Serpentosaur the entire time we've worked on it.
And would you ever consider, get those grindhouse trailers that get put in the middle of like Tarantino movies and all that fake trailers? Would you ever like consider maybe doing a short of any of these?
Oh, 100% I would. 100. I directed the Serpentosaur sequence. Went down to a beach with my great friend Caden Elliott, who's a fantastic filmmaker in his own right, and a really wonderful actor called Hendrika, and we just went down and sort of spent an afternoon getting that in the can, and we had an absolute ball doing it. And the footage, we practically shot it in black and white. We shot it in color, but we were monitoring it in black and white in 4:3, so we were getting it where it needed to be. And I cut that section together, and I remember sending it to Caden and Hendrika after it was done, and they were both just like, "Why don't we just make this movie?" And I have been sorely tempted, and there's been a couple of people that I've shown the section to who've both been like, "Why don't you just do this?" There is a sort of 1950s B movie idea that I've been bouncing around with Alisa for a couple of years now. That might. Oh, there he is. There we go.
Yeah.
Because once again, to remind everyone that we make everything. So
you do make everything.
There is the stop motion visual effect in the live action segment of our stop motion animated film.
Yeah. But and then I shot him against the green screen. As you can see, that's where he ends. He's only a neck and a head. And I put him in a vise. So this part was in a vise, and I just had to animate it going roar. And then I shot it against green screen, and then composited it into the background plate that Scott shot. And I couldn't composite it very well because then that would have ruined the authenticity.
yeah. It had to, it had to look a little bit rubbish. Beautiful animation, slightly dodgy compositing, with plenty of film grain and stuff like that to go with it.
He's slightly falling apart, but that's kind of he's a pretty rough and ready puppet, but can animate his tongue. It's great.
And that was then a lovely opportunity for the score as well. Because Alisa and I have been working together for 12 years, but it's been a good few years since we've sort of got to do a project that has a proper score. Spiral to the Center has loads of songs and some sort of score-ish. It's more like incidental music than a score. Yeah. The film before that is a found footage project, so that doesn't have a score. So it'd been a while since we did a project with a score. And so, VHX has a score I'm very happy with, but like the Serpentosaur section was a chance to sort of open up and do a 1950s pastiche and, just add to the realism of all of that stuff.
And what kind of inspirations are you looking towards when putting a score together for something like this, like a stop motion movie about videotapes? Like what kind of inspiration are you looking to kind of get what you need out of this?
Well, first and foremost, like the thing that was always in my head for the score was John Carpenter for the zombie segment of the film. Yeah. That was that piece of score was kind of already written in here before we'd even animated. Like that section, I knew what I was doing right from the beginning. Very, very retro, lots of synthesizers, lots of very 80s sparkly stuff, big drum machine stuff and wailing guitar and that sort of stuff. The earlier portion of the movie was actually a lot harder to do, trying to figure out exactly what it was going to sound like. Do we go down an orchestral route and then switch to the synthy stuff for the zombie sequence, or do we not have any score at all up until the zombie sequence? And trying to figure it out was tough. And I remember there was lots of long conversations with between the two of us where we were just asking for guidance and asking for thoughts. And what eventually I ended up writing was just kind of just really leaning into nostalgia. So not necessarily musically nostalgic, but sonically nostalgic. So, just kind of shifting chords and a bit of a groove, just to kind of chug along under the dialogue and stuff, but, made with, vintage hardware and stuff to give it that real retro edge. So it's kind of got that nostalgic kind of bent where it sort of sounds of a certain time period without sounding like it's aping that time period.
Right, okay.
That's kind of the vibe of it. So, just kind of, a nice drum beat with a cheeky little groove underneath and some retro synth,
Awesome. I always have a lot of admiration for the sound design and the score of a movie, because and especially as well, you can apply that to the stop motion animation as well, because I for a 30-second clip that I'm going to put on YouTube, I can never find the music I want. So for you guys to create your own music and to create your own stuff like that, I have a deep admiration for that kind of thing, because I'm just like, nah, it's not working. I'll just give up.
It's so much easier to make it than to find it. I'll tell you that much.
Well, yeah, says you.
Says you.
Well, it's one of those things where you could spend it. Also, finding it is far more boring. Just scrolling through sound effects libraries to find the right, plastic cracking sound. No, I'll just snap something plastic beside a microphone. Yeah. And I did all of the sound design for VHX, and it is kind of largely done as authentically as possible. So I actually cast real VHS tapes and put them aside, and I was like, okay, all of the Foley for Laura will be done by the Story of Jesus Christ cassette tape, and all of the Foley for London was Hitchcock's Rebecca taped off the TV. Okay, that one, that's that. And so literally, and I set up a microphone. I've got a photo somewhere. I set up a microphone.
Photo's great.
And put like a plank of wood on the ground and literally just puppeteered cassette tapes around on this plank of wood, whilst watching the film, Foley style. And then when, they jump down to the carpet, just get the wood out the way and do the same thing on the carpet. I found an old audio cassette. It was like a Reader's Digest, you press play and it's just sort of like, enter now to win the Reader's Digest monthly draw. It was like a 10-minute piece of audio on a cassette tape. I was like, yeah, I can get rid of that. And I snapped it and pulled the tape out. And if you want the sound of a cassette tape being disemboweled, just disembowel a cassette tape. It's so much easier than trying to find the requisite sounds to make the lie work. So that was that. It was actually, a really nice little fun weird process that took forever but was still nice.
Not as long as animating it.
Sure.
A VHS tape being disemboweled, I couldn't use the real tape in the tape because it's very flimsy and it's I can't control it. And stop motion is about control. Literally, stop motion. You stop the motion. So I couldn't use that because that would have been too hard. So I used cinefoil, which is like this really thick, almost like tinfoil, but thick, and it's black. And it comes in a big roll, and I just cut little strips of it, and then I put gloss on it so it'd be shiny like the tape inside of VHS tape. I just made a big pile of it and just crunched it together, and that's why I could get like nice little subtle movements of the tape like exploding and like dropping out of his mouth, because it's not real tape.
Right,
and that's the sound and music is so important for films like this, because obviously nothing is captured in the filming of it. Stop motion is completely silent. Every sound that you hear in the film has to be done from scratch. So picking the right voices is a huge deal. Picking doing the right Foley is a huge deal. Doing the right music's a huge deal. And it's that support network to support the film under the audio.
Imagine
the voice
shooting, if it was capturing audio when I was animating, it'd be like me cursing and like stomping like
yeah, a sustained scream. But no, it's I think in the earliest version of this film, I was going to voice every character apart from Laura. We always kind of knew we wanted our friend Erin to voice Laura. So there was a time where I was going to voice all of the other characters. And then, oh dear. I think what was the deciding factor? Was it might have been Hank.
Yeah, but also
deciding that Hank would be a better fit.
American accent is just not sufficient, and we wanted it.
Yeah,
there's a reason.
It really isn't. It really is. It works in very, very small doses, but for the amount of dialogue that this film needs, it wasn't going to work.
Yeah, for this film, there was no reason to restrict it to just you. So that was it.
And by the time we got Hank involved, and obviously he's just absolutely perfect for that role.
Really, nailed it.
And then it was one of those. The only other voice in the film was the continuity announcer, the host at the end, and it was one of those things where it was like, well, it's pointless. I'm already voicing London Tape, and I'm playing the professor in the fake monster movie, so it would then be silly to have me then voice over that section. So we decided, well, here's an opportunity for more character. And so we kind of came up with, in our head canon, which is, we basically write our films just by creating elaborate head canon that nobody knows anything about. And we sort of invented the character of this sort of like comically seductive horror host in the style of like Elvira or Vampira. I was like, oh, okay. So we want an older female voice to do that role, and we found a wonderful voice actress called Erica, who filled that role. And it was like, okay, I guess all that's left for me now is the dog. So I did get to voice the dog too.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. So we're going to start wrapping up in a little bit, but I do have a couple of little just extra little questions here, and one of them is obviously you guys have had a lot of inspirations over the years, whether it be personal inspirations of people you know, whether it be filmmakers, musicians, sound guys that you've kind of like admired over the years. If you could put VHX in front of anybody in the creative sphere, director, sound guy, animator, anyone like that, who would you show this movie to, and for a little bit of feedback, and why?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah. You like coming up with a stumper at the end, don't you, Kev?
Yes, it's kind of my thing.
You did this to us last year, and I can't remember what it was. We both just sit back and go, "Oh, bugger."
I think I might get that on a T-shirt. Beware of the stumper.
Beware of the stumper.
Maybe not. It doesn't sound right.
Well, tell you what. Next film we make that has a film within a film, it'll be called Beware of the Stumper. You know.
I do like coming
Night
up with the odd question that's going to like throw you off, but yeah. So who are we showing VHX to?
I mean, for animation, the first thing that comes to mind is like, someone at Aardman, like a Nick Park. I'll say Nick Park. We'll do Nick Park. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've always admired Aardman and Wallace Gromit and the sensibility of the humor, which I realize I have largely absorbed and don't even realize, like, oh no, this is like, I love doing like visual gags because it's like I grew up watching Wallace and Gromit, and that's where I get it from. I love a visual gag. I mean, VHX the whole thing is basically just like a visual gag, like but in Wallace and Gromit, the idea of a tape being taped over and turning into a zombie would be like a throwaway gag in the background, or maybe, right? I mean, or maybe not. It's like, or it'd somehow be like, I don't know, Walls would come up with an invention that tapes over your family movies, or I don't know, something. There's something there, but I feel like the sensibility I take a lot from Nick Park, from Wallace and Gromit, from Aardman. So I'll say that.
So if you were to try and pitch VHX to any one of our viewers who's not quite sold yet on coming to watch VHX, but you can only use an existing movie quote to pitch it, what would you say?
Double barrel stumper. Like,
oh my god, that's a film right there. I'd watch that.
That's the sequel to Beware the Stumper. Double barrel.
And I promise that's the last stumpy question. I promise.
Quotes.
Convince someone to come to our movie
using only a movie quote.
Bloody hell!
This gotta be a good zombie movie quote. Can we quote our own movie?
if you want, that's the whole point.
Tape. You do it. Tape.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a quote. And then on the last one, and then we really will start wrapping up after that. But you guys have already had the pleasure of a themed cocktail at our festival. If you could have a themed cocktail for VHX, what would be in it, and what would you call it? I suppose we call VHX, but
probably a bunch of like food dyes that are now illegal.
I think right. It'd be like Nickelodeon slime green.
Nice.
Yeah.
Candies.
Something with like popping candy in it, so it's like tastes like TV static.
Ooh,
oh, nice. I like that.
It's bright green. It has pop rocks, so it's got to be made with like, it's made with Midori, and
it's like Midori and Ecto Cooler. And popping candy. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you put a VHS label on it that says, but it has to be crossed out. Whatever it says is crossed out. And like this.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. And it's called The Zombie Massacre.
Yeah, this is called The Zombie
There you
Massacre.
go. It's
Yeah,
called
there
The
we
Zombie
we go.
Massacre.
See, we got there in the end. Right, guys. So thank you so much for submitting VHX to us, and thank you for letting us show it up on the big screen. I can't wait to see this up there. I can't wait for everybody else to see it as well. I'm really looking forward to this one because I think it's in amongst these super shorts as well. So we've got I think it's 8 shorts altogether. And I think it's a really nice mix of shots that we've got here, and it will fit in. It definitely will, so you don't have to worry about that. But honestly, guys, thank you so much for doing this as well, and joining me tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us. Pleasure,
So
as always.
So everybody, the 27th of February to the 2nd of March, get your asses down to the Lumiere Romford Film Horror Festival, Romford Horror Film Festival, whichever way you want to say it, horrific, all that good stuff. Please do make sure you all come down and watch everything we have to show. But just to wrap out and to let you guys go, past the festival circuit and whatnot, what happens with VHX past that? Where can people see it? Where can they find it? What's the plan? And then we'll wrap out there.
Don't entirely know yet. It will end up online probably this fall. I imagine it'll be October or November. That's probably the plan. It'll be up, sometime around then. It'll be on our YouTube channel, which you can find at Odd Frame Films on YouTube. It'll probably be there. It might be somewhere else first. I don't know. We'd like to get it somewhere, but we're kind of working on that. It'll end up somewhere, but it will definitely be online.
And
you can
I'm currently
to find out.
Yeah. Follow our socials. You'll be able to find everything through that. And I am currently in the works trying to actually put the soundtrack album out for, I think it's March the 3rd.